that phrase is something we use a lot in our retreats when we put on events. My needs are your needs are my needs. And basically what that, philosophy kind of boils down to is we're all in this together. And as much as I want to make sure my needs are met, I also am going to be fully committed to making sure your needs are met. And as I do, we're both able to have our needs met in the process. And that's what really community is about, right? Community is about recognizing that we all have needs, right? Human beings are not made to be isolated. And that's why this huge experiment of COVID-19 and all these things was a failed one, in my opinion, with all the lockdowns and the ramifications, not just economically, but if we just look at the cost to human flourishing in terms of, suicide rates and depression rates and anxiety and addiction issues and all these different things that have come out of isolating people and kind of moving them away from their communities. There's a huge cost to that. And so we have to fight against a culture that is consistently kind of moving us into isolation mode. Social media isolates you, your phone isolates you. So if you're not being extremely intentional these days, you're going to wake up one day and say, you know what? I don't really know that I have that many close friends. Maybe I have some friends, maybe I have some acquaintances, maybe I have someone I could call up and we can go grab a few margaritas on Taco Tuesdays together. But if the conversation is just about sports, or it's just about, something frivolous, or they're just making it all about themselves, they're a narcissistic person in the first place. And, it's like, man, is that really the type of relationships you're looking for? So this is a really good outline in terms of the importance of community. One of the biggest questions that I get asked a lot is just how do you find good people? Like, how do you actually look for people? And I would say in some ways, it's kind of like you have to give in order to receive, right? If you can start, there's kind of the old adage, right? I think it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, is whatever you're not receiving in your life, start giving more of it, and you'll start receiving more of it. If you're not getting love from your spouse, start showing love to your spouse. If you're not, having people be generous with you, start being generous with them. If you're not getting people's time, start giving more of your own. And all of a sudden, that reciprocal nature, whether it's the law of attraction or it's simply the law of reciprocity that all people want to uphold in a common society, will start to come your way. And so when it comes to community, if you want to have people have deep connections where you can share anything that's on your mind and be held and be seen and be appreciated for whatever you're going through or supported and challenged, why don't you start right where you're at with some people in your life and start doing it for them? Right? Now, by the way, when you first start doing this, that might be a little jarring, especially if all you ever talked about was the game last night, or, what are you doing this weekend, or the latest news or whatever. So it might be a little jarring to them for you to actually ask them an interesting question, for a change. But what I find is the right people will start to gravitate towards you when you do that. So if you go ask 10 people, like you set up 10 30-minute calls with people just to catch up, and you have 10 interesting conversations, maybe 3 or 4 of them are going to really start to head in that vulnerable direction. And again, you're going to have to practice vulnerability yourself so that they can trust that that they can open up to you. But if you do that, 3 or 4 are probably going to be really interesting. And those are the relationships you want to continue to pursue and maybe deepen in terms of community. So that's one tip I have in terms of how to begin to create that community. What other tips do you have, Mike, that come up for you on that topic?
The idea of what you just said about expressing vulnerability, and as long as you're willing to be vulnerable, they're going to reciprocate. And I think that especially with how many people cast judgment onto others because they don't have the same beliefs. So it's like a lot of times people bite their tongues. It's like, ooh, maybe I don't want to say that out loud because what if they're the opposition? It seems like there's almost like in our community of the United States, there's like these two polarities that are opposite. So it's like if I speak something that is what I think is my truth, but it's completely opposite of what somebody else thinks, now I have like this opponent that is casting judgment over me. So, my thought is how does someone offset that that potential concern of being vulnerable. What are your thoughts on that? I have one or two, but I'm curious what shows up for you.
One thing that comes up for me is if I'm myself and I'm rejected for being myself, then that person who rejected me is probably not someone I'm interested in being in community with anyway. So as a starting point, that's my general approach, is if I'm willing to open up and somebody judges me for that, and therefore they don't, want to be in community with me, great. Now I know that they don't want to be in community with me right off the bat. I don't have to waste time, is one thing I see. The other thing is, like, I in an ideal position, even if someone disagrees or has these other polarities, we have close friends here in town, and they're very different from us in terms of how we see the world and our philosophies and our ideologies and all those different things. And but we get along great. Like, they're just the sweetest people. We love hanging out together. Our kids get along. We get along. We have really interesting conversations. We don't always agree, but like, we treat each other with respect, right? And I think in an ideal world, that's where we would want to go. And actually, that diversity of thought actually makes things more interesting, in my opinion. So I know I answered your question and also threw a segue in there, but
that's perfect. I mean, that's an excellent response, because ultimately, if you're not accepted for your authentic self, then you probably don't want to be in that community anyway.